Is our reality a quantum hologram? What if the truth about life after death lies waiting to be discovered in the basement of a haunted house? Are we connected to galactic civilizations? I lie awake at night thinking about these things. I never miss an opportunity to ask bigger questions.
Hi, I'm Ron James, and this is another very special edition of Bigger Questions. I have been honored to have Travis Walton drop by the studio, and this is kind of a big deal for me. I helped on the film that Jen Stein produced about Travis, and I have looked forward to the day that you come and sit here in the set and chat with me for a while. So Travis, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
You know, a lot of people are pretty familiar with your story. You know, it was the subject of the movie Fire in the Sky, and it is considered to be the best evidentiary case of encounters with an alien entity. And so, you know, yesterday was the 41st anniversary of that happening to you, and to say it was life-changing for you is an understatement. How do you feel now?
Well, you know, yesterday, watching the film being played, it was very sobering to have that kind of encapsulated overview.
So the film about you has been in numerous film festivals. It's certainly garnered a lot of attention. And how do you feel when you see it? You've seen multiple edits, and you know, you've seen it go through its thing. You've seen it go through the drama of making the film. You've seen all the different characters be reunited at Skyfire last year. And it's really almost reignited the whole story and breathed new life into it. How is that for you?
It's timely. It is important to, have this kind of coalescing because, the interview, for example, with Sheriff Gillespie was the last interview he ever did on this subject. He passed away after that. So that was barely in time.
You know, it kind of surprises me that as long ago as this happened, and the fact that it was the subject of a mainstream film, there had not really been a definitive documentary that was as well done as this. There had been TV show segments, of course, and things that were done pretty well. But I think that what you guys collaboratively did was just a fantastic piece of historic documentary. Why do you think it took so long for something like that to get made?
Well, it's a very huge story, and it takes a long time to tell it. You're really not going to be able to do it in your normal one-hour TV spot anyway, and that's the reason when I'm out speaking about this, every talk is different because you can't get it all into any one talk.
Now, I know in private conversations and publicly you've stated that there were things that were part of that experience that you'll never talk about.
It's not like it's secret, it's just that for me, the important message that I'm bringing out is the reality of this, the phenomena in general, with this case as an example. So anything I can't document doesn't really add and might even take away from the message I'm trying to impart. Is that this is real. This is not some kind of supernatural fantasy. This is just a fact of life. We live in a vast universe, and you got to take your eyes off the ground and realize we're a part of something much bigger.
Now, one thing that I found very interesting last year, we were at Skyfire and we interviewed some people that had not been previously interviewed, and also some off-the-record conversations really revealed the fact that there'd been a lot of sightings in that area. Even the sheriff had been involved in some. And so, had you been aware of unexplained sightings in the air prior to your...
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing people will only impart to someone once they're confident, at least in that rural community, once they're confident that it's going to be well received, but they don't talk about it openly. But it goes way back. There are petroglyphs in the canyons nearby depicting alien craft and beings, and it's these can't be faked because the rock ages in a very particular way that's takes hundreds of years to form that kind of patina.
So it's even part of the Native American lore, and I guess
Yes.
that would qualify this area of northeastern Arizona as what they would call a hotspot.
Yeah, we're right between the Navajo and Apache reservations, and I gave a talk on the Navajo reservation to nearly 1,000 Native Americans, and I was amazed that they're finally opening up to outsiders about things that have been, common knowledge about what they call the Sky People going back, traditionally hundreds of years.
Yeah, the Native American lore and all the way down into South America and really pretty much all of the ancient peoples all seem to have that unifying thread, some kind of relationship with people from the sky. So it surprises me really that it's so taboo and unacknowledged in our own society.
Yeah, and it's really amazing that in this technological age where we have the means, the Hubble and Kepler telescopes to actually quantify the number of possibly life-supporting planets, that people can act like, oh, it's so ridiculous that there could be aliens and they might come here. Well, I'll tell you what, it's ridiculous for you to think they're not.
Now, let's talk about you and what you're doing now, and kind of where your head's at 40 years after this has happened. It certainly made you a household name just about, and you've had a dramatic course change in your life because of the incident. But there's a lot more to Travis Walton than just the guy that got abducted and had this experience. And so tell us a little bit about what you'd like people to know about you.
Well, you can run, but you can't hide. I've got to confess that I, tried to just withdraw from it all and not talk about it, but that wasn't too helpful. I found that if I refused to do an interview, it didn't make the interview go away. It just made it a lot more negative than it would have been. So in order to set the record straight, I had to get out there and explain things. But gradually it became, apparent to me that there was a bigger purpose here. That, I certainly, it's not going to go away if I don't talk about it. And, I'm left with the possibility of making some good things happen in the world on account of it. And, that's my principal purpose in continuing to talk about it.
So this is almost like you were ordained to have this experience and share it with the world and to bring about some sort of awareness or change through it. And it seems like you've slipped into that pretty easily, like you're accepting it and that you're taking it and you're doing the work, even though it's not easy.
Well, it was a struggle, and I have to admit, I've been tempted many times to find a way to walk away from it. But, I'm pretty committed now to try to, promote understanding on this phenomenon.
So what's the main message of understanding that you'd like to convey? I mean, a lot of people have these abduction experiences and they read like horror novels, but what happened to you is distinctly different. It's almost like they were some sort of a crew that wasn't involved in abductions and you just were in the wrong place at the wrong time and they felt some obligation to resuscitate you and to not do any harm. So you had a completely different experience than people that are like, oh, I got taken on the craft, they experimented on me. Nothing like that happened to you.
I think it's important for people to understand where this reluctance to accept the phenomena comes from. It's not just people who are upset with widening their perspective, upsetting their traditional paradigm. There actually is an organized disinformation campaign, and a lot of the negative that came from the general public was first initiated from, people whose job it is to discredit this phenomenon for some reason. So, people need to be aware of that it's a kind of a programmed dumbing down for some reason.
So, I'm not going to give away anything in the film, but it tells the story of, what happened back then, and then it follows you to later on in your life where the impact is readily apparent, and it's a really good piece. One thing that when people talk about the group and the fact that, the lie detector tests and all this stuff, and the fact that it's still maybe it was just this made-up hoax, but then you guys have had years where there were splinters in the group. You guys weren't talking to each other. There were times when the relationships were strained at best, but nobody ever came forward and said, oh, no, it's all BS. Even through times of not talking, times of disputes, everybody involved in the incident has held true to the story. And to me, that speaks to the authenticity of it. How do you feel about how the group has held together over the years, even when they weren't?
Well, we were never a group of close buddies. I mean, one of the crewmen had only been there 3 days. And he passed away here a couple of years ago, but of course everybody stuck to it to the very end, because what happened happened. And there's been various quarrels and disagreements amongst the crew. It's just normal in any work crew. Not every work crew is a group of friends, but we managed to get along enough to get the job done, and we shared a powerful experience that you would think would have bonded us closer than we were. But life goes on. Over the years, we even lost track of various crew members for a number of years, and had to go look them up when they went to make the movie Fire in the Sky, for example. Yeah, I think just the initial remarks from the president of the American Polygraph Association, that when you have 6 people passing tests on the same issue, a test that's acknowledged to be less than perfect, the odds against there being any problem in the situation where 6 people are being tested for the same issue, the odds are 1,000,000 to 1 of there being any kind of a mistake. Now, that was back with 6 people passing tests.
Sure. As
of now, there's been 16 passed tests in connection with this. 5 of them passed by me, with 3 different examiners of the highest caliber.
Now, I'm sure that you're always getting requests to do yet another polygraph or yet another regression, and you've kind of stated that you're done with that. What's your feeling about it?
Well, to consider constantly repolygraphing suggests that the previous ones weren't adequate. The examiners that I had years of experience in law enforcement and interrogation, and in the service of government agencies at the highest level.
Have you thought about doing any more regression? Would you be open to it ever?
I've been hesitant to do that, and the reason being that there seemed to be kind of a built-in hazard in my case. If you want to regress someone, apparently what you're doing is bringing them back in time to a certain period. Well, if when I was hit by that energy, I was put into cardiac arrest or worse, the hypnosis could put me into that. And that's not a state you're going to bring anyone out of with hypnosis. At that point, you're in cardiac arrest again. So
there could be real physical danger.
Yeah, physical danger to that. Dr. Harder did try to, get at the blocked memories and was unsuccessful. But apparently there was evidence that there was something that he couldn't get at.
So I think the memories that aren't blocked are probably enough, right?
Yeah, that was a handful, and I haven't been eager to, enter into a situation where I might have a whole slew of experiences to learn how to cope with. I think I do a better job of it now than I did back then. I've come a long way. I've, had the opportunity to be involved with support groups for experiencers across the country, across the globe. Back when this happened, there was no such thing as support groups. It just hadn't developed to that extent.
Travis, a lot of people talk about, this guy's just telling the story, he's trying to make money. And I think what people don't understand is that none of us are making any money in this field.
Oh, no.
What you have done and what you continue to do takes a tremendous amount of courage. And if it was all about money or anything else, you could have just done, there's a lot of things you could have done. You could be working in Heber, still, running a sawmill and make more money. So what do you say to people that just say you've got these weird motivations for sticking to this story?
Well, it's kind of strange. People look for a reason to disbelieve something because they begin with the prejudice. I have to find some reason. That's why when the skeptics would come up with the flimsiest, most ridiculous ways of trying to discredit it, people would latch on to these things without giving it a second thought. Oh, it was a drug hallucination. Oh, okay, fine. Well, never mind the fact that I had blood and urine samples put through the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's drug screen, which proved there was no trace of any drug in my body. On top of that, there's 6 other people who saw exactly the same thing. No one experiences identical hallucinations, whether it be a drug hallucination or the other theory, the transitory psychosis, or that the hypnotist planted these memories in my mind. Dr. Harder made the point that if you had 6 people testifying that they had witnessed a murder in an American court of law, that's an open and shut case. But in spite of the fact that on top of 6 consistent witnesses, they take polygraph tests and pass them, people are, acting like that's not sufficient. I make the point that either the bar is set too high for UFO experiences, or it's way too low to be handing someone a death sentence.
But that's a really excellent point. And there's a lot of people that say that if the body of evidence was heard by a jury about the whole ET phenomenon, that they would have no choice but to find in favor of its validity. And we did that with the citizen hearing on disclosure. That was that litmus test where we actually brought it together and we paraded the evidence. So I don't understand why this stuff isn't being acknowledged in a more mainstream thing. And I think what you said about dumbing people down.
Well, a lot of the researchers have chronicled the process of within the media of achieving the ridicule factor to such an extent that it's beyond anything that would occur naturally. For this to be, it was a major propaganda coup for the term conspiracy theory to come to mean those things that are crazy and not true, which basically is a defense against people who commit conspiracies, because if a conspiracy theory is always something that isn't true, that only wackos believe, that was quite an achievement to commandeer a term like conspiracy and turn it around to make it the reverse.
Last year in Snowflake, I had the pleasure of being there and spending some time with you and actually going to the site where it happened. We got some great photographs from that, and some of it was used in the film. But another thing that was really special about it, the 40th anniversary gathering, was that Mike Rogers came and was a part of it. He hadn't been for a very long time. And it seemed as though that there were some past rifts that you guys had that people know about, but there also seemed in Heber last year to be a lot of healing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it was a tough thing to deal with for all of the crew members, and all of them dealt with it in their own way. Some of them, had some personal troubles on account of it. Some have been counseled, and it was a life-transforming experience, and for every one of us, no matter where they stood with it, they knew that life was never going to be like it would have been. For Mike to come out and return to talking about it was a major, step for him, and to encounter Officer Ellison, that was the deputy who took the report from the crew that night. And that was basically his first time of speaking out on it. It was quite a major step forward for everybody to connect on that basis.
They made the movie Fire in the Sky, and you're certainly on record as not being too thrilled with the way they spun it, and certainly with the visuals. I think they went steampunk aliens. Let's talk a little bit about how you feel about that film.
Well, I think, I still look at the film as a net positive in terms of, getting people to at least pass through the kind of emotional experience that we lived through at that time. The fear and horror and shock of what happened aboard the craft. What they portrayed there leaves you with the same emotion, but it wasn't at all what happened. And that was probably the most unfortunate thing about the movie, and probably the filmmakers, came to regret it as much as anyone. But I've, over the years, collected emails and such letters from people expressing the desire to see a more accurate remake. And I think that'll happen someday, because the key things that people wanted to, experience for themselves vicariously with a film were what they didn't get with Fire in the Sky. But the background, the emotional interaction with the family, law enforcement, the community, all of that, that's, some pretty powerful stuff, and that was represented pretty well in that movie.
The way the film unfolded was different than a traditional movie. It really took you into the story, and we didn't even really get to the meat of what happened until almost, 3/4 of the way into the film. And that approach is echoed in the documentary as well. It unfolds in such a way that we don't get to the meat of what really happened until midway into the film. And I think it's an interesting coincidence, but it worked in both pieces. It was the reenactment the part of Fire in the Sky that bothered you the most, or?
Oh yeah, that was the greatest criticism I would have. There were a number of fictionalizations throughout the film that, I was against initially, but I came to understand you got to do this if you're telling a story that spanned, many years in 90 minutes. So there's a shorthand that's necessary to make it even intelligible to the audience. But everything that happened aboard the craft was practically in real time, and that was the greatest deficiency there. So in doing this recent documentary, the Travis film, it was an opportunity to sort of allow people that vicarious experience with some reenactment that would sort of correct that deficiency from Fire in the Sky.
So, here we are 41 years later. What's an average day like for Travis Walton?
Well, I've been doing more and more appearances lately. It seems to be increasing in demand, and it's amazing how after 41 years, the interest worldwide has not peaked yet. It continues to grow exponentially, and I'm getting contacts from pretty obscure places on the planet.
And you're still living in Heber, right?
Yeah, I'm the only one of the crew who still lives in Snowflake, Arizona, where the whole crew lived at the time. But, Heber, Arizona was the focal point because it was the town nearest where it happened.
Sure.
And the town from which I called for help. Those phone booths there are still there as kind of a monument, a local landmark. They're non-functioning, but they're kept there because of what happened there.
So, I don't want to go back and ask you too many questions about what happened because it's all out there. But one thing that did come to mind is that you were talking about how there was a kind of a quiet understanding of the ET lore in the area, going back to the Native Americans, and even people in the town had sightings and were certainly whispering about it. But then when you came out with your story, it was met largely with ridicule from the community on the surface. Was there any kind of unspoken acknowledgement that happened at the same time where you were pulled aside and said, look, man, we know?
The people who knew me best were the most supportive. They know that none of these theories make any sense at all with what they know about me. Much of the response that was negative really did come from what I came to realize is rooted in fear. As the years passed, the truth leaked out. So much of the response I was receiving shifted from snail mail to email, and it would be every year or so that somebody would really lash out. And I found out that rather than going into recounting the evidence and that sort of thing, my best approach to that kind of individual was to just simply reassure him that don't be afraid. The odds of this happening to you are minuscule, and it's astonishing how that would turn them around to where they were all apologetic and all that pushback was gone. So I realized that a lot of what was going on there was fear. And, people, when they're afraid of things, ridicule is one of the easiest tools, Even in the military, the enemy might shoot you tomorrow, but they're always making fun of the enemy, they're ridiculing the enemy. It's the way people deal with fear. So I go at it from that standpoint, is to try to make people realize that it's not something to fear. It's something to be very curious about.
Now, there's a lot of people, especially that go to the ET conferences, that actually wish it had happened to them. and I'm sure you've heard that from time to time. What do you say to people that are like, wow, I wish I had something like that happen to me?
I say, be careful what you wish for. But, as time went on, I came to realize that much of what the negative aspect of what I went through was a misunderstanding of my situation. I said even fairly soon after it happened that the response and the reaction I got almost overshadowed the fear and shock that I had of the experience itself, because it was protracted. It just went on and on. It wasn't going away. At least the shock and fear that I had was short-lived. But a whole lot of stuff conspired. Circumstances came together to make what happened aboard the craft much more frightening than it would have been had it not been that way. All sorts of things, to wake up disoriented, not being certain of where I was, and to suddenly realize you're trapped. To feel like you need to flee or fight and you can hardly move, that just adds to the fear, and you're trying to summon up more adrenaline, more energy with which to, fight or flight. And all of those things combined with the feeling that I was mortally wounded, that's very life-threatening. But above all, the feeling of suffocation. The one scene on in From Fire in the Sky, where the actor is held down on the table and there's a membrane over his face and he's struggling to scream through it, struggling to yell through it, breathe through it. It didn't actually happen. There was no membrane. But if you were to show an actor looking panicked and breathing hard, you wouldn't really get the connection to the feeling of suffocation, because there's nothing that will cause more panic in a person more than that. And so that, set the stage for all these other factors that contributed to my fear level being off the charts. I compare the experience to the thing of waterboarding, to where even though this interrogation technique is known by the enemy, they even practice for it. They know it's not going to kill them. They know they're coming out on the other side. It still works, because nothing creates fear like the feeling of suffocation, especially in a way where the person is left unmarked. But that whole thing set up a fear situation that contradicts the idea that people suggest that, if that happened to me, I'd stay calm and, ask questions and take souvenirs, that sort of thing.
While we were working on the film, and we'll get Jen Stein up here a little bit to talk about that, but I got the opportunity to take a stab at the reenactment sequence myself. So we did this thing in my studio, and we didn't have a huge budget, but my whole concern through the whole thing, as we made it and as I put it out, was that you at least didn't hate it as much as the one in Fire in the Sky. So, we looked at it again, and we're going to show the audience right now. This actual cut did not end up in the film. We used bits and pieces of it. So this is the only place that you're really going to see it intact. So let's take a look.
When I regained consciousness, I was in such pain that it would actually sort of knock me back out again, the pain. I knew something was terribly wrong with my body. I could move, but it was so difficult. But I felt I was probably safe in a hospital, that I was being taken care of. There was some sort of device across my chest. I had a lot of pain in my chest. I could hear the sounds of movement around me, and I just took this to be doctors. Then when I looked in the direction of the movement sounds, I could see blurry forms that I thought were doctors wearing surgical caps and masks. So when I sharpened the focus in my eyes, I could see that was not the case. I was looking into the face of this creature. Then I knew I was in very great danger. And here this face was so close to me, another right behind him. The fear gave me the strength to raise my arm. It pushed the one that was standing close to me back, and he fell into the other one. I was rolling away from him, and this object across my chest fell off. I got on my feet and staggered back, and I bumped up against a shelf, and there was an array of instruments laying out there. I just glanced, grabbed the biggest thing I could find, and started flailing in their direction to keep them from coming any closer. That moment was the focus of my nightmares for months afterward. They stopped with their hands extended towards me and staring in a way that felt invasive and intrusive, like they were looking inside of me. It was horrible. I came to realize that it had to do with the stare, and the stare was them trying to reassert control, I think. Once it was apparent they weren't going to physically or even telepathically control me, they turned and left the room and went to the right. And so I went in the opposite direction that they had gone. Were they behind me? Were they pursuing me? Or was around this tight curve that I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, was I going to run into something worse? Adding to the panic was this feeling of suffocation, this feeling I was about to pass out from lack of air. I came to a doorway and looked in. I was fearful of the chair in the middle. It was a high-back chair, and I was afraid there could be someone sitting in it. So when I moved to the side and could see that there was no one in it, then I moved towards the chair. And it was then that I realized that the closer I came to the center of the room, the walls, the floor, the ceiling were darkened except for points of light. It was a planetarium kind of a projection. My main concern was open these doors. I assumed that perhaps the buttons that were on the arm of this chair might open the door. That moved the star pattern. I was already unsteady on my feet. I turned and there was a man in the door. He had this glass helmet over his head. I started towards him and babbling questions and trying to tell him about these creatures that were there. He took me by the arm and was leading me out. We went through what I think was an airlock. You know, this door closed and that door opened and we went out. At this point, the craft we came out of was parked inside of this big hangar-like building, or it might have been part of a larger craft. He led me towards the vertical wall opposite this, and through some doors, down a hallway into a room where there were some other people. They were very similar to him. A similar dress, similar coloring, light-colored hair, light-colored eyes. They're leading me, taking me by the arm and putting me over towards this table. I was in a weakened condition, but I felt their strength. But still, the panic I had at being restrained like that, I was able to jerk one hand free, and they put this mask over my face, and I got my finger under the edge of that trying to pull it away. But before I could pull it away, boom, I was out.
So before I get your reaction, I kind of did that, you know, I stylized it a little bit. You know, there's things flurrying around that were actually in the Fire in the Sky movie, the visual effects, and then, you know, the CG aliens, and my friend Tim dressed up as the tall blonde. We went out and got wigs. It was pretty fun. And then the very end, I did the little black and white treatment as kind of like a nod to the sci-fi movies of the 50s. And so, you know, all of that being said, what did you think?
I would say, you know, there's been quite a number of reenactments that have been added to various documentaries over the years, but, you know, that's, the best of the lot. So, you know, of course, with a limited budget, it's never going to be perfect, but I thought it was very much in keeping with what I experienced.
What did you think of the kid that we got to play you?
Well, he had a certain resemblance that fit that in. He was a better fit as an actor than D.B. Sweeney, who played me in Fire in the Sky, as far as being my type, you know. Yeah,
you know, we went out and we found the flannel shirt, and we put a lot of work into just trying to make sure that there was at least a reasonable resemblance. I'm very gratified to know that you appreciate that piece and that it was okay, because that was my main concern. I'm like, when this is done, I don't care what other people say, but I don't want Travis to hate it. And so, you know, I'm just really happy that you like it. And this is the first time it's been put out, so hope you enjoyed it, audience. And don't forget the movie, Travis, The True Story of Travis Walton, the final executive producer director's cut is going to be mass released somewhere big. And you can get other versions of the film online. And when we come back, we've got Jennifer Stein, who made the movie, and we're all going to talk about it. So we're back here at Bigger Questions, and we've been joined by Jen Stein. So now I'm here with both her and Travis Walton, and we're going to talk about the film Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, which is sweeping film festivals everywhere. So guys, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So, the film started out as just this regular genre-based documentary, and it turned into something that's going to be huge.
Well, we hope so. We're still in the process of trying to market it to some networks or some distributors, but the film festival results that it's been having has been really shocking to me because many film festivals don't really accept UFO films. They're kind of prejudiced against them. But the film that we really worked on quite closely together, it's more a personal story about what happened to these men, focused specifically on Travis, but not only on Travis, and really following his book, which I took as my outline and really tried to follow. So because there's this personal story woven through it, it's being more accepted than we expected ever. And these are mainstream film festivals. This is not just underground film festivals or UFO film festivals. There are just a few of those out there, but these are all mainstream film festivals, and they've been grabbing it, picking it up. Even film festivals that don't actually accept it. I get emails sometimes from some of the screeners, and they're like these long emails about how they saw fire in the sky, but they never really knew the true story, and they've been so moved and touched by it, and it's this ranting on and on and on and on. And they say, it may not get accepted because the rest of my board may not be open to this, but I just wanted you to know how I felt. And those are very touching emails.
Very, very significant to be accepted in film festivals that are completely outside the UFO genre.
Yeah, in fact, we just did the Arizona Underground Film Festival that Travis got to go to, and the response was great. You had a full audience and lots of questions, and young people were there in the audience. Yeah,
there's an increasing interest from young people. It's people who weren't even alive at the time that this happened. And it's amazing that it's a look back for them. To me, it seems like yesterday.
That's an interesting point that you brought up, because people that are active in the genre are talking a lot now about how younger people do not seem to be engaged in the way that our generation is. And to me, it's not so much that they're not engaged, it's just that they're not getting their information from the traditional outlets. They're not going to conferences, they're watching TV, and they're doing other things. But talk a little bit about what specific types of interest you're seeing. What kind of questions are they asking the younger crowd?
Well, we have to start over with them and basically educate them about things that they were completely unaware of, and they're very surprised that all this happened, and amazed, and just more accepting than you might expect. I think a lot of the problem isn't just a younger generation exclusion of the UFO subject. They're poorly informed about politics too.
So when I begin to answer and educate them about the historical debunking process that took place in the 50s, and advise them to go look at the Robertson panel, the Robertson documents, and really build their own body of education and background. I've gotten many emails back from, intelligent, bright kids that have, been through college and been exposed to lots of history but knew nothing about this, and they're thanking me. And I think that's what's happening. With social media, they're starting to talk and communicate with one another. And they're starting to step up, become educators of their own circle of friends. And it's amalgamating into like an expanded awareness and expanded consciousness. If you're seeing an integration or an interdisciplinary approach now from many young people who get the fact that these are overlapping areas. And you may see, truth in one that you see in another, and the debunking of these areas is very similar as well. And that's what the younger generation is waking up.
Oh yeah, it's definitely connecting with the younger generation. I have a number of rock bands named after me, a number of rock bands with songs called Fire in the Sky. There's quite a bit through the music industry that connects with young people.
You know, it's interesting some of the points that you brought up, because I've had this conversation about why the youth doesn't seem to be engaged in the same way as the old guard, for lack of a better phrase. And I've been given the idea that young people have an inherent knowing that we did not have. So the idea that there's an alien presence and the idea that they're engaged with us, you know, a lot of them are hybrids already. You know, it's like we're seeing a generational leap in human evolution that would normally take 10 generations happen in one.
There is a huge shift away from mainstream media to the internet. That's where all of this new renewed interest is coming from.
Yeah, I would say, and add to what Travis is saying, the internet provides them the opportunity to quickly research what they want to see. So once they get exposed and once they see some transparency, certainly as we are having in this current political arena that we are in, they're realizing that, okay, you know, there's an understory here, and there's an understory to many stories. The access to technology and the power that gives them to learn is huge, and I don't think you can keep a lid on it anymore. Once people get excited about the potential of what's there to learn, there's no stopping them.
So do you think there needs to be more of an effort on behalf of us media creators to specifically target that demographic? It seems like a lot of times we're making the same old films for the same old crowd. And you know, this film has bridged that gap. And I think that it's created a precedent that we all need to be looking at, okay, how can we make our content more appealing to the kids that are going to watch it, and really focus that so that we have stuff that's going to get out there into the mainstream that's going to attract that audience. And there's been a lot of talk about it. There's been a lot of effort to do it. But then we have Alien Con. So now the big guys have come in, big business, and done these conferences, and they were able to pull thousands and thousands of people in.
Well, the people who are investing in AlienCon need to be very aware that they can get into serious trouble if they in any way undermine the credibility. Because, you know, the shift away from mainstream media to the internet as a source of information about the world comes from a distrust of those sources. And, you know, AlienCon had better be wise to the idea that these are people who want to look beneath what's being fed to them and you know, realizing that there's different versions of how things are.
Although you kind of got to hand it to the Ancient Aliens guys. I mean, History Channel has done a pretty decent job of getting the information out there, and pretty much like a lot of the facts that we know that we consider to be swept under the rug and not really well known, they've incorporated that stuff, and they're not afraid to go out there and talk about some of these different things. So, you know, History Channel's done an okay job. They were behind Alien Con, and the real truth is getting into the mainstream media.
I think what would also help if people in Hollywood who are interested in this topic, there's many actors and other filmmakers and producers who have a real interest in this topic and also have some experience with this topic. And if they would be willing to come forward and share and talk, or even have a Hollywood conference around the topic, the younger people will, you know, have role models in which to reflect, just like they have done, say, with drug issues and things like this.
Sure.
Don't do drugs, I got into them, it was an issue. You know, don't let people tell you not to trust what you see in the sky, especially here in California. There's lots of stuff happening on the coast.
It's harder to move from ridicule to non-ridicule than it is to move from ridicule to this is cool. You know, young people are going to respond to that sort of thing when, you know, various rock stars come out and, you know, or actors, you know, the icons of their culture are saying, yeah, I'm into this and proud of it, you know.
And we see a little bit of that happening, a little bit, not a lot. A few brave people are coming forward, and I think that's shifting things.
So let's get back to the film. How long from the time you turned the first camera on until the time that you finished the current cut?
We turned the first camera on really around August 2013, and we just finished July 2016, so that's a good 3.5 years. I had the pleasure of meeting Travis at the Roswell conference in 2010, I believe it was. So we went out to dinner, and we were saying to Travis, your story is no less important and no less significant than the Roswell story. You know, the more you dig in it, the more you find, which proved out when we did our film. We continued to come up with new data, and things came out of the woodwork. So we thought if he worked on putting some sort of network together between Heber, Snowflake, and Holbrook, getting those city councils, those city mayors together, there could be an economic, reoccurring event every year that kept this in the radar of people, because I think we need to do this with these types of stories. Always have a place where people can say, well, I'm going to go to that conference next year. I'm going to meet some of these people firsthand myself. It was wonderful to go meet Matthew Badger, the head of the local Herald Tribune, Barger, and hear his stories, hear the people who worked in the office, who were children at the time and remember the story, hear their stories of what they saw. So that's how we actually got started on this film project. I offered to help coach and coordinate an anniversary conference. And in the planning of that, Travis wanted to take everybody up into the forest, probably at night on November 5th. And I'm thinking to myself, as a conference coordinator, that sounds dangerous. It's a half-hour walk from the nearest rim road. There's no bathroom up there. What if people get lost? They go off in the forest, they get attacked by a coyote or a bear, or they trip, or they hurt themselves, on a log you can't see, it's pitch black. So I'm thinking, what if we have a film? Then if it rains or it snows, we can sit them down and give them a virtual tour.
So the whole time that you're weighing the potential risks of doing that, did you also weigh, what happens if a flying saucer comes back and zaps everybody?
I think a lot of the people that attended were hoping it would come back. But,
exactly. Yeah, I think I was out there on the site, and there was a lot of people just trying to breathe that energy, even though it had been 40 years. But yeah, I think you're right.
5 or 6 key people came together and just really committed to see it all the way through, no matter what it took.
Yeah, and initially I was worried that maybe the locals would not be, enthusiastic about it, but they came to really support it and realize that it was a good thing for the community, as it has been for Roswell and McMinnville and other communities that have, embraced the events that happen in their location.
So, I was going to ask you that earlier. You're still living where all of this happened. And, with the increased notoriety, are you the new favorite son of Snowflake?
Initially, when it first happened, I was concerned about the effect on my kids that were still in school. But
Sure.
it turned out that, hey, cool, your dad's in a movie. So that was cool with them. But there was still some resistance with the old timers sort of mentality going around. But, that's in the last 2, 3, 4 years, it's really turned 180 on that, personal response. Something positive, people go out of their way to come and greet me or something every time I go out.
That's pretty cool. So a lot of people over the years, I'm sure, had approached you about doing this kind of film, but there was a time in this process when you actually decided, okay, I'm going to move forward with this woman on this film. What brought you to that point?
What brought me to that point was, the sincerity that she had in wanting to do a responsible job. She wasn't just somebody from way outside that didn't know the topic. She knew so many of the people involved, some of the experts that were consulted for this film. I think, her experience in the field was probably a major deciding factor.
Meeting Travis, I realized there was an opportunity to do something important. And
Talk a little bit about the process and some of the emotions that have been involved in getting this film finished.
Well, I think it's, pretty good as far as working with her back and forth, she requesting my input and, trying to give it where it was needed. I've done so many documentaries and shows over the years that, I at first treated it as just another one of those. But as time went on, I saw her attention to detail and determination to get it right. Then, my respect and regard for the project increased as it went along. She, was drawing on many, many resources. I'm not the only source involved here.
We both have a mutual goal of, reaching out to networks now and trying to get their interest in this story, and also trying to get the film screened at conferences and things like that, which we're doing. It's done very well.
You know, I've been approached about remakes of the movie, and someday that'll happen, but that's a completely different thing. That's sharing the vicarious experience on an emotional level, whereas this is fact-based.
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic piece of work. I really appreciate the opportunity to have some involvement in it, and you guys are just amazing. So thanks for being on the show. And again, the film is Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. You can buy one version of it on DVD, but there's a whole other version that is extended with more interviews, more information, and even better documentary work that is coming soon to a larger distributor. So, guys, thanks for being here.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having us.